Cool. Talky episode it is.
Talky episode.
Yep, just gonna emphasize that at the start. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about gamification and sort of like codification and all that sort of stuff. Partly because of obviously what I'm doing in Obsidian, which is
Yeah.
exciting. Obviously, we can
Yeah.
we can talk about that later. Um, but yeah, because I guess the what I have in my head, right, is inside of Notion. We're going back at like a year or two now, but inside of a Notion, I was always trying to. I don't think it was deliberate, but as soon as you add a formula in, you add an element of codification to your workflow. Like whether
Mhm.
that's you've got this many days left, so you've got to get it done by then. So it's kind of like a task, quest, challenge, whatever word you want to put there. Um, or if you add a point or a priority point to something, you've given it some sort of status. Um,
Yeah.
Similar with like Pomodoro techniques and the rest of it, and adding emoji colors and even progress bars to an extent. You're like, oh, look, I've almost done this project, sort of thing. And I think at a very basic level, that is what gamification is. It's changing the look of something and adding an element of progress towards something goal via. It's not code, but it is code, no code, whatever. And obviously, Conrad Lin took this to like the nth degree with
Yeah.
Notion and created like the
We're
gamification project.
so cool. I have to say,
Yeah,
I think it's so really, as a gamer, that's so much fun. But when it came to productivity, I'm like, wow, there are so many things I have to do.
exactly. And
And I'm like, wow, I don't think I've got like the capacity to gamify this. Like, I don't have the want to gamify it that much that I have to do X amount of things every day. Like when I game, because I am a gamer, I do play games, I love them. For me, I play games to relax and to have fun, and I don't really play them quote quote properly. I was playing a game literally last night, the original Nier, which is an RPG, and there is an auto battle function. So it does all the action battles for me, and I can just enjoy the story. I mean, the story rips me apart every time. It is the most depressing game you'll ever play. Um, but I love like being immersed in the environment, and I enjoy that part of it, which I think is where people have lost. I think people have lost sight of like the gamification elements. They're too busy in the business world. Oh my God, it's so ripe. It's like, oh, I want to put leaderboards in here, and leaderboards will make everything better. And no, leaderboards are not gamification. That they're not. They're a component, and they are not gamification itself. And people just slap that in there to make it feel good and to
interesting.
tick a box.
So the way I see gamification is what you do to the actions, and leaderboard I think is like a result of the actions, sort of like competition. Because you can
Yes.
create a
Yeah.
leaderboard from any sort of metric, and that
Yes.
metric is obviously decided by someone or some group of people. And so as soon as I don't think as soon as you add gamification, you automatically add the leaderboard. I don't think that's it. That's it. But I think that's
No,
what a
it's
lot of
not,
people
but that's what
think.
happens in the business world.
Yeah. Um, so out of curiosity, then, inside of your Notion, do you have going along this line of thought? Do you have elements of gamification in there, like a progress bar or a due date with a countdown timer or anything like that?
No, not really. The only gamification I need is the satisfaction. I suppose the only element of gamification where I get the reward and I feel good of it is just ticking them off. That's about as far as gamification works for me. I recently implemented the status property, um, because there was the done, there was a checkbox which had done, and then there was also a like a select or multi-select. And what me and my team were finding is I wanted the satisfaction of ticking a box. That to me was the gamification. I was like, I want to press the button. Yay, yes. Like dopamine, yummy. I feel good about finishing a task.
Completed. Yeah.
Yeah. But also there was a lot of stuff that needed, there was a process to be followed with the rest of the team. And so we needed both. Now we only have the status property. And so it has a view on the homepage for me to feel good and just press a tick button. the tick box to make it done. And if it's not done, it's half ticked. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, we're nearly done with that one. And it does give, that's about the only motivational gamification-y thing that I really have. Because I literally was looking at it recently because I had a potential client who was looking at that. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't, I, no. Like, if I want to have fun, I'll go and have fun. But I'm here to do my work.
So
Real.
do you think gaming has to be fun then? Like gamification, not gaming as it was, but like gamifying an activity. Do you think it has to be fun?
Not necessarily, but that is the
Now that's interesting. I was expecting yes, because that's like in my head, when I think gaming, I think fun or enjoyable,
yeah.
or I
I
don't
mean,
want to
yeah,
say
I do think that's fun, but I think what's happened is it's coming from the businessy perspective. Gamification has been a hot topic for so many years, and it's more about punching people with dopamine and making them addicted to what's going on, and that is the focus of most gamification in business. And so that's kind of pulled and sucked the fun out of it for me. And I'm just like, oh, it's a manipulation technique. And it is
yeah.
to manipulate and hack your emotions to get you to do things. And it works, sure. But there is such a, in my experience, there's either it's just such a surface level, and gamification for me personally isn't enough. It feels like it's an excuse, and it's kind of like gamification is this like, oh, I need to put this on there on top. And I'm thinking about courses in particular because that's what gamification shows up in business. I'm putting gamification elements on top because my content isn't good enough. Like my content isn't enough on its own. And so I'm like, I find gamification has benefits, obviously. Duh. Everything is good and bad, but I feel I am burnt out on the gamification elements, and the risk of gamification. The risk is that it becomes too complicated, a la Conrad Lynn's gamification project. It's
Yeah.
amazing. I love it. It's really cool. And it gets my like RPG fanboy, like it is literally designed for me because I love RPGs. I play them all the time. I am always playing RPGs, literally near as an RPG. But I could not imagine working in that every single day. It would drive me insane having to do these. I just want to get in and get out. I was like talking about Notion because that's where we started. Like my viewpoint of Notion has shifted recently of like what I see Notion as, and I don't see it, hot take, as a task manager, as a project manager, as a resource store, it's not any of those things because it's frankly not good enough to be any of those things. What it is,
I was going to say you're going to have to correct yourself. Well, not correct yourself, but support yourself up a bit. Every Notion
oh,
user is just like,
oh yeah, they're just like bring it. But what, and I spoke to someone yesterday and they were like, I've spoken to multiple people trying to get this formula working as a really like beautiful, lovely, complicated thing that was fine. But they had so many formulas doing formulas that it broke Notion. And I think it's like recursive or something, and it stopped that from happening. And I just and he's gone to multiple there is a point.
okay. I was going to say with the formulas, out of curiosity, is it a point of 6? Does it stop at 6 data
I
points?
I think so, something like that. I don't know entirely, but basically
If
he
it
got
is, I found that bug like 2 years ago.
yeah, I know. He messaged Notion support and they didn't say anything. So then he went to multiple consultants and asked for help, and they were all like, "Oh, I don't really understand that, and I don't know how to help. I just make UI interfaces for businesses." And I'm like, and then he came to me and I'm like, "Yes, because you shouldn't be using Notion because Notion is not designed for what you want to use." And that's the thing. I think that Notion is a deliciously beautiful user interface. It is a place to look and view and see information. It is not to live your life inside. Yes, you can. And if you look at the most successful use cases of Notion, if you look at Marie Poulin, it's a visual interface. It looks nice. It looks good. It's fun to be in for her. And that's exactly what I think Notion's strength is. It's not task management. It's not project management. Yes, it can do it. The reason why I use Notion is because I can set things to look a certain way, but adding tasks into Notion, pain in my fucking ass. I can't stand it. So I created something to build on top of it so I could connect it in. And I think that is where I feel Notion is and will always be. There are some cool things that they've added in with the status property. Yeah, great, wonderful. It's really helpful. But it will never be it's more of a hub, a place to go to find everything versus a place to do everything. Anyway, I got very sidetracked and just went on that lovely little rant there. And I think, yeah.
So when it comes to all of the stuff that people are building in Notion, I saw Thomas Frank tweet recently about his regex exploration, and it looks like his regex formulas are the same ones that I was making like a couple of years back when I was fiddling around with the templates, and it looks like the same sort of thing. So it's kind of his second channel seems to be obviously a better version. I say better because it's more popular, but that's probably not a good metric. His journey is the same as mine, where he started using Notion, he got into using formulas, now he's using regex and doing all this sort of stuff. He's earned a hell of a lot more than I did, probably because of his face and his skill in marketing, because I can't market and I really don't care. What?
Sorry, probably because of his face. He has a face.
Okay, he has a brand associated with his face. God. Yeah, but that's literally what it is.
He has a sexy face. Everybody, Danny thinks that he has a sexy face, and that's why it sells.
He has a face linked to a brand. But yeah, anyway. So his Notion journey, I think, is very similar to mine. And it's going to be interesting to see where he goes with it afterwards, because as soon as it wasn't until I got into regex and I found out the limitations of Notion's formulas, and then the limitations of what you could see, what you couldn't see, and the next step in research. Like, I want to have this information. I can't do that in Notion. Okay. I want to have this setup or this simple thing over there. I can't do that in Notion, because you have to have a database with relations and rollups, and then you start adding and then you're looking at your database, and instead of having your 4 properties, which you love to have, you've got like
you got 50. Yeah,
you've got 10 relations, 20 rollups, all calculating different numbers because you can't roll up certain things. You've got rollups and rollups that are looking at formulas, and you're like, what am I actually doing right now?
and this is where the person I was speaking to yesterday got to, and I'm just like, then do all the data. You want numbers, you want to figure out numbers and how that works. Go and do it in a spreadsheet and then bring it in.
Yeah,
I think that is where Notion is going to go. That is my prediction of Notion. Right now, everything's in Notion because everyone's in that. It's gone mainstream. It's like, oh my god, Notion could do everything for me and wonderful and amazing, and we're just out here going, you just wait. You just wait.
I think it can do everything, but the limitations are, I think the only people that see limitations are people that are researchers doing lots and lots of things, but they'll only see the limitations if they're aware of the other options available. Otherwise, I think it's good. And for people that have a good understanding of Notion, it's useful for. But for those that don't have a really good understanding of Notion and their system, it's very difficult. And
I think you caught a point now. Like, if you have an understanding of how you work, you really need that. Because Notion is never gonna be what you need it to be. No app, frankly, will be what you need it to be if you don't know how you work. Listen to last week's episode. Of like, it never really is. And I think what Notion gave to me when I use Notion was the ability to figure out how I worked.
Yeah, same.
And it exposed that for me. And now it's exposed it for me. I know exactly what I want, and I will go and get it. And one thing I think that's different from when you were exploring and you got to the end of your Notion journey and you moved was we didn't have the API. Now I know you're like, oh,
Wow.
I don't see the point of the API, etc. I do, because I think if you like the way that Notion looks, there is a lot you can do. If you like the way that data is inputted into Notion, if you like the fact that you can view the same information in various different ways, can't even remember how many, but in each of the
6.
different views, 6. Yeah, it might be more now. I don't even remember. If
I
you
wrote a
like,
book on it.
I wrote a book on it.
Yeah, I had a chapter because I started with 5 and then I forgot a view and then I had to put in a 6th one because I forgot one.
Yes, you did. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think I was the one who picked up on that one. You're welcome.
No, I figured it out, but you told me in the feedback because of Pac's amazing communication.
Oh yes. Yeah. So
We won't go there.
we won't. No, we will not. Yeah, and I think that is Notion's power. And once you know, if you want to see things in different ways, Notion is about the only app that can do that for you in a way that is. If you like how Notion looks, nothing's going to really fit that.
I think it's a user-friendly sort of UI change because changing the way it looks can be done in most apps now. Well, I say most apps, most of the tool for thought apps with either a CSS, which you'd need to understand code to be able to change it, or you need to import the theme and then change all the settings and stuff. Like Notion adds constraints because you can only really use what Notion gives you. You can't change it very much. So I think it's like you say, I think it's a nice tool for people to start with to figure out how they work, etc., etc. But once they get to a point like myself or you or Tom or whoever that understands maybe a little bit of code, but understands how to customize it a little bit more to them. Like in my video about Obsidian fully moving whatever switched thing, really, really good there. I just picked out words in the title. I was like, yeah, that's not in order, but whatever. In that video, I said there are like, I wanted the colors to be a little bit brighter and I wanted to change some of the things just slightly. It wasn't big changes. Like my Obsidian is not too different from Notion, apart from obviously it being Obsidian, not Notion, but it looks very similar. It's still white background. It's still black text. It's still the same font actually, because Notion and Obsidian have this have a similar font. But it's a brighter orange. I have a blue highlight when I hover over things, so I know where my mouse is, because sometimes in Notion, like, where's the mouse? I'm like moving it around because obviously white on white doesn't help. And when I'm in a block, the block is highlighted, which in Notion you can't do. And I think because Obsidian, I have so many pages open, I need to know where I was in that page. So if I've got 4 pages open, I got a gray block, I know where my mouse is, where my cursor is, and I can just go. Obviously, all the other stuff in Obsidian counts as well, but from a visual perspective, you can do most things from Notion in Obsidian. Even the whole gallery view thing, you can do it. It takes a bit of work, but you can do it.
And I think you hit something there on the constraints. I think Notion's constraints is in the user interface.
Task simplification.
Yeah, it is very much like the user interface is where most people go, oh, this is really nice. And then once you reach the point like where we were like, oh, I want to do a bit more now. I want this and I want that. We realize actually the simplification.
If you reach that point.
Yeah, and you don't have to. Obviously, if you're happy with where you're at, then don't change. That's the point. It's if you get where you want to be and you're good, don't do no more. Like there's this, I find it so frustrating in the Notion space. Oh, look at this. I need to implement all these new things. No, you don't. Unless you have a reason to implement it, just don't bother. It's pointless. It doesn't actually help you. And I do find the whole the reason why I stopped making Notion videos is because the meta for Notion videos is to talk about all the new features and then share them and do them and use them, and it's just like, why?
You missed a bit.
Oh,
make a template and sell it.
Oh yeah, of course, make a template. I mean, let's not even talk about templates. I'm fucking sick of templates. Templates are shit. They will never help you.
Look at what I built in 5 minutes that you could probably build also in 5 minutes, but I'm going to sell it to you anyway.
I mean, I ain't got a problem with people making money off of stuff, but
no.
It's so... The frustrating part with templates is that, one, they will never provide what you want. They are a starting point, but they are never marketed as a starting point. They're marketed as the one solution, the solution that will fit everybody. And then if you talk about Notion's own templates, we don't even want to go there. Like, it's as if Notion don't know how to use Notion.
So I've been having to think about this recently because obviously the course that I've got up with Obsidian is in theory a template, because it's not a course where you go, you've done lesson 1, done lesson 2. It's just a template of information. Like, here's information on 3 apps that I use, and go explore, go read about the thing. So it's technically a template. But when you look at it, it's
I don't think it's a template. I don't it's not a template. It's not a finished system. It is
but it is. Like, if you go inside of Obsidian, you have a folder, you have notes. And the folder system is there. I mean, I do have, I don't know whether you got it actually, because I think you got the course earlier, but I have a zip folder in the course that is a template of my Vault. It's got the hotkeys, it's got the plugins, it's got the layout, the workspaces, etc. That's all in there. So you could go in and just start as if you were me, just from like 0 notes. And that is a template. But what is it? Just blank folders, blank notes, and then settings in the tool.
I think that's the only decent template that exists.
Yeah.
That is a template. That is what a template should be. It is absolutely just a very...
It's literally the tool, just with my settings.
Yeah, and that is literally what a template should be. But what's happened is everyone's making these OSs and operating systems, but you don't know how your own operating system works. That's the problem. And that's why the templates never work. I have had so many people come into me going, yeah, Notion is just not for me. I downloaded this template, I use this and I use that. I think there is only one exception, because I've spoken to a number of people and they've got like Marie Poulins. Like, Notion Mastery is about the only one I've ever heard like people go, hey, this is not like the other templates that are just being sold. Like, you know, it's a very different type of template. I think it's close, from my understanding. I've not seen them, I don't know, I've not even downloaded them myself, I'm not part of Notion Mastery, but what my understanding is it teaches you how to use the tool, which is what I think your template does. And
yeah,
I think that is,
I guess I'd class them as like micro courses rather than templates.
Yeah, and I think that is, and that's exactly what I did when I released templates. I had micro course. They were micro courses. They were hyper specific. They cost
I just made
more
that
than
word up, by the way.
I like that, micro courses. Yeah, it is. It's a mini course that is specific to teach you a specific thing. So I had the Course Junkies Guide to Completing Courses. That was a mini template, a mini course, which taught you how to keep track of all your courses. Now I've stopped selling that now because, frankly, it was a little bit too much of a template for me to be happy with selling it, because it will get you started or overwhelm you.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, for me, I've shifted my approach to being very much, I'm happy to give you a constraint to work within, but I think there is a limit to how, like, the benefit of the constraint, it depends on the individual. And with a template, it is a fixed constraint that is just that. This is the constraint. You sit within this constraint, and if you don't fit, well, tough shit. You fucked. You fucked. Yep. Whereas what I think you have with your Obsidian thing is you have a constraint, but it is so wobbly.
I was going to say, I'm trying to figure out what
the boundary. It's more of a boundary. It is more of a boundary that you sit within versus a constraint.
Yeah, but I don't even know what boundary it is. I'm trying to, like, because you could. I think the only boundary that comes to mind is, yeah, but it's not. I was going to say it's Obsidian, but it's not, because it's documentation of other tools. It's not just Obsidian information. I guess the only boundary would be the features you get in Obsidian, which is the same that you would get in a course. You can click and play videos. You can click to other pages. If anything, you've got less of a boundary.
I think your boundary is the way that your brain works. You're sharing how you work. That is it's kind of more of an environment versus a, yeah. It's kind of like a
I see where you're going with it, but yeah. even though, like, you can go in, not watch the workflow videos, learn Obsidian, and then do it yourself. So you don't even need me. Like, essentially, you could get the course I don't like the word course because it doesn't really take you through anything. It's just help documentation. But you can go in, look at the app setup of Obsidian, look at the app setup of Zotero, look at the, I think, lesson 3 of the workflow video. So like 3 videos, and now you've set up Obsidian, set up Zotero, and now you've got your own workflow going with Zotero integrations, which is what people in the academia chat in Obsidian, in the Obsidian Discord do. Like they go through that process, and you could go into the course, do nothing with Morgan, do literally nothing with Zotero apart from set it up. And that's it, yeah?
Pretty much what I did.
Yeah.
I didn't look at Morgan because I knew that didn't fit me, but I looked at the videos that just to connect Zotero to Obsidian, and that was it, because that's all I need. And I think that is the fun, like, you provided a place to play within, like an environment. I can't think of the right word. I still believe that boundary is kind of like...
There is one there, I just don't know what it is.
The boundary, you can't clearly define the boundary. The boundary is you. You are the boundary. That's how I see it. Like, it's your way of working, the way that fits for your brain.
I guess it's the information that I have.
Yeah, it is literally the boundary is the information that you have, and you're sharing the information you have, and they go with it. And that's literally it. And I think that is where the benefit comes, and where I'd like to see templates go. But being able to do that, it's not a sexy sell.
No.
It is just not a sexy sell. And it requires way more work and effort from the people who are doing it. And that is the thing. It's like, it's not sexy. You can't hack your way to, $10,000 with that. And if your whole purpose of making templates... Oh God, I'm going to be hot taking today. If your purpose of making templates is to make money, stop it, please. Just go and do something else, because I just think it's wrong. Like, I don't mind making money. It's just, it's in it. Thank you. It's unethical. It's just, you are fucking with people's lives. Like, productivity is so individualized and personal, and you are trying to force people to work a certain way. And we have enough of that in the space.
Ain't got to say that again.
We have enough of that in that space, and it is so hard to watch like people churning out templates that don't fit anyone, that don't help. They just cause more confusion.
There was something on Twitter that I read. I think it was from Tem, optimization.
Yes.
Yeah, that one.
I love it.
Yeah, and it was a memey sort of tweet, sort of image thing. It was kind of like the text conversation, and it's sort of going. No, it wasn't. There were 4 squares. There was the Notion template creator, and then the seller, and the Notion template creator is like, here's my template, blah, blah, blah. The person says, oh, do you use the template? And then in the bottom corner, they're just like looking really sheepish. And then the seller's like, so do you? And I think that's a perfect example of where I see a lot of templates from Notion, is they build a template for other people, but they don't use it themselves. August and Marie are the opposite. Like, they use their template day to day, which is why it changes, which is why they have a course around it.
Why it costs a hell of a lot more money.
True.
And it's worth it. It is worth it, because it is very much... I don't know about August's course, but I've seen little peeks of Marie's course after speaking to her, and she teaches you how to think in Notion, like, and how to really tweak. And they are the only valuable things that I've ever seen, that I have seen that is actually a value. I really do. And yeah, I don't care. I'm going to be ripped to shreds. I'm bored of not being ripped to shreds. It's more fun.
I'll take my formula back then.
No, because that has value. Yeah, but that's the thing. That is actually a really good point. Like, those pieces, if you're trying to learn it just because you want to learn how to do things, yeah, there is the value. But no one sells it like that. No one is honest. It's
I'm trying to be.
Yeah, no, you are, and that's the point. Like,
so I'm stuck on like no sales. Well, I have got sales, but none in comparison, I guess you'd say.
And that, I think that is the thing, is it's easy to earn 10K with Notion templates. It's hot, it's amazing and wonderful and great, but it's figuring out whether you can. Yes.
I'm just thinking, with regards to marketing,
Mhm.
Notion templates do well. Well, if you were to have a course, because Obsidian, Marie started with a template and then built her course around a template, or built her course around multiple templates.
Mhm.
August built his course around his OS template.
Mhm.
Their course delivery isn't about a template, it's about philosophy of practice.
Mhm.
So maybe that's how we should build courses, around a template, and just push a philosophy of practice.
Yeah, because also it's one.
That links into my little experiments over here as well.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah,
Cool.
yeah.
I mean,
I love how we just like, that's
yes.
yes. It is. It is very much building around a philosophy of practice. That is the, I hate to say best, but it is one of the better ways of actually helping your clients
Efficient.
get success. Efficient, thank you. It's an efficient way of helping your clients gain success in what they do because it's built around you and the individual, and you're teaching yourself how you work through the constraints of that template.
So this is something I want to run by you, partly because I want your opinion, and partly because I think it would add to the conversation a little bit. With regards to my gamification codification system thing that I'm building in Obsidian, I'm not actually changing anything in my vault apart from adding a star. That's literally it. But the star so adds an arbitrary value to my working note specifically, right? Because what I have in my head is I've got my written, my writing, and my waiting notes because they are a status of what notes I've written, what I'm writing, and what I'm waiting to write. I think that's fairly logical, and I don't think that's too much of a lofty thing.
No.
Like due dates, action dates can be philosophically challenging. She's like, well, is it or isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think a status tag makes sense, like in my head anyway. So I've got the tags there already. I've got active tags, I've got to do tags and stuff, and then I have projects which are separate. But in my research, which is what I wanted to try and gamify is the word that I'm using, but it's more than that because in my head, when I look at a note, I try to remember how deep I went in the note, how verifiable the note is, because some of them, like the note-taking note, has lots of videos, YouTube videos as sources rather than research. So I wouldn't class it as a very verifiable note, but it's a very deep note. And then there's also the perspective, because some of the notes that I have for research are my perspective, just my perspective, whereas others have a little bit more of a broad perspective. So in my head, there are 3 levels, I guess you could say, to a note, which is actually what I've sort of like scripted out. I say scripted out, I've sort of planned out. So I've got depth, I've got 5 levels of depth, 5 levels of verifiability, and 5 levels of perspective. Brief, shallow, broad, deep, comprehensive, opinion, case study, meta-analysis, synthesized, critiqued, stated, linked, expanded, explored, and polarizing. And those are already in my head. So I was like, how can I see those so I don't forget them? Oh, let's just add a really small thing. I don't want it to be a tag because I don't want to mess up my tag pane. So I'm just going to add a star. That's literally what it is. Star, colon, colon, and then just a one. I'm going to share my screen. I know everyone else won't be able to see it, but actually, will they see it? Because I'm recording Zoom. Maybe they will be able to see it.
People see the video.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so if you do watch the podcast on a podcast, then come over to the YouTube channel.
Um, yeah, I'm not going to share all of it on the thingy because there's some stuff that I still need to figure out. But yeah, so I mean, this page is on my Obsidian Publish. So if you search for Vaultcraft on Obsidian Publish, you won't see the actual results of the data view, but you'll see what the data view does, so you can recreate it if you want.
Like that. That's pretty nice, actually.
But yeah, I mean, I've got I say explanation. I mean, it literally says, when consuming information, add source notes to my daily note. Once I've done that, put the source notes in the working notes. Then when I decide to research something, it goes from waiting to writing. And then once it's written, it is written. And then I just, like, in my head, I have something to it. The actual nuances behind assigning these, I'm still figuring out with the data view and stuff. But what are your initial thoughts with seeing that? Like seeing a depth value of 1 star, 3 star, I don't know what you'd call the other things, like triple stars and stars on stars.
Yeah, I quite like that. That's really,
because it's just one input value.
Yeah, I don't know whether I see it as gamification though.
I think this is where I was like, codification, is it codifying in my head? I'm not sure, because it's not quite a tag, but because of the data view, like as I scroll down, you can see it's showing me, oh, here's this, and I can see what pages are quote good and quote not good. I guess the gamification element that I'm playing with is I can add any value to any star. So, for example, if I'm a level 1 on depth, that's a 1. If I'm a level 2, that can be 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 5, 5, etc. If I'm a level 2, 1, maybe that's 6. I have no idea what these values are going to be. But what that does is that gives my vault a value.
Oh, I see.
Now, I don't have to add anything because the stars are there and data view is picking that up automatically. All I need to do is just set the values that it's assigned to whatever star. So I've got like a lot of stars. I think at the moment I've got it calculating just how many pages there are. So it's just like I have 9 pages with stars. So my experience is 9. But if I change the value of the stars, I can then change the value of what experience is. So maybe if I add in a working note, I get 1 point. But if I distill a working note, it's 5. So it leans me towards doing more depth of research. I've also added, so at the bottom of this, I have a data view for all of the sources that I don't have links to. So I have 73 source pages that I don't have a link to a working note. Most of these are because they're linked to courses. I say like playlists in Obsidian, in YouTube. So all the ADHD ones is the How to ADHD playlist. And I basically went through the playlist and just added it to her people page. So it's not linked to the neurodivergence page yet. Fred Cummings is cognitive psych. How to ADHD is, again, there's a crash course. So all the crash courses are on the people page. But when I'm actually going through, and I've got some papers down the bottom that I haven't actually referenced, put into working pages. But I don't want that. So I can take that off my experience. So it's giving me a value to play with, using the tags that I've got and the star value that I have. The tags I do anyway to help me organize stuff. And obviously you can see here that I can filter for tags. I filter for tags anyway. But that's there. And then do you see sort of where my head is at?
Yeah, I do.
And it's really simple. Like the actual Cody stuff for data view, not so simple.
Yeah, this is kind of going, what you call there, something that I've been thinking about a lot of, like, what I often see with people is like, oh my God, why are you doing this overly complicated stuff? It's like, for example, connecting APIs and using JSON and things like that, and your Cody bit that you're doing here. It's like, why are you even doing that? That takes so much time when you could just do it anyway and write it in manually or do this or do that. Why are you doing? Because it's you're doing a lot of work up front, but then it's going to make life super easy. And it's moving, I suppose, from like that instant gratification to like you will get what you want. You'll get that delayed gratification. You will love every second of what you do because now you've spent 3 hours doing this. And this is an experience I had with my own stuff of like I can now press a button, add a task. That took me way longer than it would take me just to put the fucking task in Notion on its own. But because I took the time to build something that fit the way my brain worked, because I spent 3 hours rummaging through scripting in Apple Notes, and because I spent that time connecting it up and seeing how Integromat worked and wondering whether I could do it separately, and now I know how to do that, so we'll be doing that. That is where it gets exciting for me, because once you can create something, like it takes me, let's do 1, 2, 3. It took me 3 seconds to be able to add a task, name the task, put it in. It's done. I don't have to think. When I want to go do a task, I'll go do it because it's something separate, and that's task management. And this is another thing, like with my podcast, I've just released a live video. Cheers for all the distractions, Danny. Great. It's great. Thanks for that. Like, I released a video where I explained why I use Descript and how simple I've made my podcast release schedule because it needed to be. I spent all the time learning a tool so that it is just easy for me to come in, hit record, press a button, drag a thing, do X, Y, and Z, and then I'm done. Because it makes my life easier. I had to learn stuff up front, but the long-term benefit of that is just like, yes. But what I don't see people talking about that. Especially like in the PKM space, I rarely see it being spoken about. In the productivity space, people are all about the hacky tip tricks, the marketing piece. Everyone just wants instant results. They don't happen.
The upfront cost is sort of forgotten about.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the aha moment I had while we were talking. So I changed my folder system a while back in Obsidian, now 7-8 months ago, because my vault was getting too big for me to like manage in my head. Because I would look at the list of notes, I'm like, damn, I can't remember what I'm writing, what I'm working, blah blah blah. Which is why I changed the folder system so it wasn't source processing working. I can't even remember. Yeah, I think it was that. And added the tags. But now I'm at a point where the tags are getting too big. Like in my writing, I have I'm writing 18. I've written 34. I'm waiting on 72, and then I have 345 others. Like that's a lot. And even though I've only written 9 pages, those 9 pages are not shallow. Like they are fairly deep pages, like approaches to human cognition, extended cognition, multimedia education. Yeah, like they're fairly large pages. The relative age effect's got like 200 references in. And remembering how verifiable, how deep, and what perspective I took, I have to read through the page again. So what I'm sort of like seeing in my head is the folder system was the start. Then I needed the tags because it got too big. And I feel like this is the next step almost, because I think my vault has got like 5,000 notes in, something like that. Like 5,002, look at that. But it's so hard to work all of that out in your head for me. And inside of Notion, I couldn't deal with like 30 in Notion. Like 30 notes in Notion, I'm like, oh, this database is driving me mad. Yeah, you could do all the filters, but then you got to go backwards and forwards between all the filters each time, and it was just a pain in the bum. So I feel like this is going to be a next step for me, but it also opens up the door to so many other customization elements, is the way I see it, because I'm using what looks like kind of scary code. It's JavaScript. Yeah.
That what you just said there around So I have reached a point in my work where I know enough to be dangerous. That's what
Yeah.
I keep saying. And I've been talking about this a little bit on Twitter of like, I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm ready to go more. I've reached a point where I'm like, okay, Zapier drives me insane. Integromat is great, but it's just that little bit. There's a block there that I can't get. I want to see the data. Show me the data. Show me what I'm actually working with. Don't that word that I can't pronounce. Obfuscate everything. And so I'm actually switching to a different platform, which allows me to have no code and code at the same time. And that for me is so much more like it's kind of what you were talking about, like that next stage, that next step, because I've learned everything I can and I want to learn. And I'm now moving into the next stage because I want to be able to not use Integromat for my automations. I want to be able to have that working. And so that is kind of just that just was like, oh, that's exactly what's happening. Of like you've reached that point of like, I want more now. And the reason and you're more and it's less of a like throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's more of a this is what I'm looking for. It can't do this. How do I make it do this? And I really and I think that is the process that when you see Notion people redesign their workspace over and over again, they go through this stage and then everything gets stripped right back again.
Yeah.
Because they reach the limit and they're like, well, I can't do it. It's too complicated.
Let's go back to the beginning. I'm a noob again.
Yeah. And I think that's where Notion is always, and that's why my perspective of Notion has shifted. Notion is no longer my system. Notion is a component, a piece, a part of my system. It is the visual interface that I look to see things because I like seeing things differently. And then now I'm building out different, like an example of this is I've set up an integration between ConvertKit and Notion. When a broadcast is sent, it goes into my Notion because I can see how many people look. So I don't have to go into the ConvertKit interface because I don't really like the ConvertKit interface. It's too annoying and I don't like it. And they keep changing them, that kind of thing. And I want to see that data in different ways. And so now I can go into I literally, if I want to see, like when my last broadcast was sent, I just go into my ConvertKit system. I literally ConvertKit email hub. I can see I've had no subscribers in the last month. And the last week I've had none either. Oh, great. And I had 3 people click on a link in the email that I just broadcast sent, and 72 people opened and read it. And I can see that in here. I could go into ConvertKit, press buttons and use shortcuts and blah, blah, blah. But I don't have to. I can go into my Notion because I like how it looks. It looks nice. It's pretty.
You've made a dashboard for yourself.
Yeah, I've made a self-organizing dashboard. It's so beautiful. I love it.
And that's where I was going to say that's where Notion like is good because it's great at creating dashboards. And when you look at Marie, August, and all those Notion users, they have dashboards. And I think that's what Obsidian isn't lacking a dashboard because I have my homepage and I have my daily page. But when it comes to all of the data and the numbers, I never collected any numbers or any data in Obsidian, so I never needed it. The only numbers I needed were how many numbers are in a tag, which is shown all the time. Where I'm at now is I want a dashboard for a little bit of information, which is where the code comes in. In Notion, most of the time, you need a dashboard in Notion. Like you can't really not. You need a home space.
Dashboard. Dashboard is a necessity.
Yeah, so you
cannot work without it.
That's what I mean, and like, which is why I think Obsidian has a lower bar to entry because you don't need a dashboard. All you need is the knowledge of how to type on a page. That's it. Like I said in the video, the fully switched to Obsidian video, I see Obsidian like Word, like Microsoft Word. Like, you don't know what all the buttons do in all the different tabs in Word. You just know the ones that you need to know. Most people use the home tab, change the font text and size, and that's about it. Don't know the other stuff. Same with when you go into Excel. Most people don't know what data validation is and VLOOKUPs and the rest of it. I don't know. I just push numbers in a cell, equals sum, done. And Obsidian, I think, is the same. And what I'm doing now with data view and data view JS is just the macros in Excel or the stupid layout referencing that's in Word that I can't stand because it doesn't make any logical sense. But that's what I think I'm doing, and it's sort of like the evolution of learning and taking your sort of like moving forwards and then going back to the start. I see that as a system expanding into an environment. Like, it's now sort of like engulfing another system from elsewhere, and you now need to sort of reorganize that all of those parts. Like yesterday, I spent so many hours like smashing my head against the table because data view JS wasn't working right because I don't know JavaScript. But it was a fun experience. I learned loads, and when I got to the point where I'm at now, I'm like, yes, success. But it took like 3-4 hours.
And I have a suspicion. I suspect that if you did this at any other time, it would not work, and you would have given up. But because you know what you want and you're going after what you want, it makes motivation not even a thing. I mean, it is a thing. Like that's my perspective. I don't see once you reach that point, motivation isn't even a thing. It's just, hey, I want this. I will smash my head against the wall as many times as possible to get what I want.
I see it as a threshold because I've tried data view 4 or 5 different times in the past, and I've got stuff working. I'm like, yeah, cool, I got a data view, and like the motivation was there just to experiment, but the motivation wasn't high enough for me to really go in and explore it. Now I've got this idea that I've got in my head with using stars, vault crafting. I like that term. You're gasping.
Yeah, I just realized something. Carry on.
Okay.
It's related, but not.
Right. But yeah, now I've got this idea of like Vaultcraft. I have a threshold of motivation that pushes me beyond the, yeah, I'm not going to tolerate me smacking my head against the wall to, yes, I'm going to tolerate it for like 3-4 hours now. And it took a while, but I got there because there was a reason to do it. It's kind of like in a game. Like when you go and explore, you're like, well, I'm not going to go over there. There's no point. And then you get to the point in the quest where you're like, actually, I have to go over there. I really want to go over there now. And you go do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So my brain just got. So one thing that I'm working on right now is really getting specifics. This is a business thing on who I serve, why I serve them, and where I'm at. And I think you just hit on who I am looking to serve. It is the people who have reached that motivational threshold of like, okay, I have a business, it works, but it is literally held together by tape and glue. It is only just about coping. And every time I look away, I'm worried it's going to fall apart. And that is the motivational point. It doesn't have to be negative.
Blow it over.
Huh?
I just had in my head, like, you put the thing down, you turn around, the wind just blows it over, like, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that is something that is just like, oh, pinged for me around the motivation of like, there is a threshold of when you're ready to move forward with your system or your like, and what you want to achieve. And what I think in the PKM space is happening is everyone's trying to go to output. What if you don't have to output?
But our brain is like a computer, and that's how it works. Oh, he's gone in all serious.
Yeah, and that is where I'm at. I'm like, what if we don't output? Why do we have to?
You're full like fluid dynamics, ecological dynamics right now. You're like, what if we don't need to output something?
I've had that happen to me. I'm just all of a sudden. So here's a lovely personal story. Like belonging is something that's caught me so much. I like belonging to a community and having that belonging. And it's like either you do belong or you don't. And one of my friends said to me, she just went, "What if that wasn't even an option? What if it was possible? What if you have all of that yourself? Like, what if the responsibility to belong is yours? What if it's yours? Like, instead of it being a belonging or not belonging, what if that's not even a possibility? What if that's not even an option?" And I'm like, well,
that should remind you of our conversation.
which one?
The neurodivergent social construct one.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's literally
What
the
if it's
underpinning
not an
assumption.
option? What if it's not an option to be
Yeah.
anything other than who you are? That is where we got to. Obviously, unfortunately, it didn't record the fucking conversation. That's really irritating. But that's where I've got to with neurodivergent. It's like, what if that wasn't the only option is to be who you are, and
The
you can have a label. A label is a choice. It's no, it's not. It's a decision. You decide to have a label, and there is nothing wrong with that. It's your decision, and you can have it. But what if you didn't have to?
So this is an area of philosophy called metaphysics, right?
Cool.
Yeah, I know. And long story short, the idea of this philosophy of thought is you take world one, earth one, whatever you want to call it, and you say, what if that didn't exist? World zero. Or what if that existed, but to a further extent? World 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. And you have an infinite amount of worlds going forwards and backwards. That what if this was a thing or this wasn't a thing? And Philosophy Tube did a video, I can't remember what it was about, but she used an example where what if big and tall were categories? Like they weren't just properties of people, they were categories. Only big people could do this thing and only small people can do that thing. And you can objectively say you are big and you are small because you're above a certain height. Well, in our world, you're like, well, that's stupid. You're just taller than that person or you're just smaller than that person. But in this world too, no, they are categories. Okay, well, what if you go, instead of world one where we are, we go world zero, and well, it's just a thing. It just happens. There's no tall, small. It's just a number. You take that thinking from height and you put that into any other category, and that's what we're talking about. What if it's not a, you can't do this because of that, or you can do this because of that, or you shouldn't do this, or you should get
What
this?
if you just can't do it?
Yeah, exactly.
What if?
It's just a property. It's just a thing that you have. And that's where my mind was like, that's the foundational thought behind the conversation we had around neurodivergence, which is that video is taking me so long.
I bet. Because you're attacking identity for some people.
I could be, yeah. That's a perception that may happen.
That's a perception that's going to happen. Our last conversation, some people did not like what we said.
Oh, no. Well, I don't think it's they didn't like. I think it's they had an interpretation that was different from the intended direction,
Yeah.
which is challenging. I recently watched a video clip from Andrew Huberman was talking to someone, I can't remember who, and one of the comments from Andrew Huberman's podcast was around someone misinterpreting what Andrew had said, essentially. And the comment suggested that Andrew didn't understand that a calorific deficit reduces your weight because that's how thermodynamics work in the body. But Andrew knows that's how thermodynamics work. He was just adding a nuanced perspective on the way that it works. And it was either the misinterpretation or the potentially laziness of the individual not to understand what was being said in the first place and just jump straight at like their point. Because I know the commenter was another YouTuber, and they were trying to push this narrative on their channel. And the assumption is that they went to this other channel, didn't immediately see what they wanted to see, and just jumped straight at it. And this is a fairly big YouTube creator, like 1.2 million subscribers. And they jumped at Andrew Huberman's comment. And I think that is something all of us can do when we're confirmation bias looking for something. You're like, I didn't hear what I wanted to hear. I'm going to jump at you now. You're like, actually, listen. And that's hard. Like, really listening is hard.
Yeah. And that just, and I think that was the experience that we had at first with you of like, it doesn't, I don't know why I hate that, but I hate it. It was an instant, like just going with what I had and just like immediately bias smacking, and I was just like, I want to yell at you. Like that's where I was at. I was like, I want to yell because I'm like, you're wrong and you have to be wrong. But
A couple of weeks later.
yeah, and exactly. I mean, you're not right and you're not wrong, but it is a perspective that exists. It's an option. It's a decision that you can make. It's a choice. There are multiple choices, and then you can decide which one you want to go.
Yeah, I think another characteristic of this is something I see on Twitter all the time, especially in the ADHD space, probably because that's what I'm looking into, so it's blasting on my feed a lot. But as soon as someone suggests that someone with ADHD might not have it, or someone suggests that it's not real, but everyone does that. As soon as someone says, everyone does that, or everyone has that to a level, everyone with ADHD suddenly goes, nope, you're wrong, and then like attacks the person for saying, well, that's just a characteristic. And the person saying it's just a characteristic isn't wrong, because it is a characteristic. The ADHD has a level of that characteristic that goes beyond whatever point you want to put in, depending on
actually that is the diagnosis criteria,
which is quite vague in my opinion. Like you could have two diagnosticians. I have no idea what people that diagnose you, and they have different perspectives. And you're like, how can it be a diagnosis if you have two different perspectives on the same thing? And I think it's very hard to have that conversation around what it is, what it isn't, if everyone suddenly just attacks the person that questions them. And I don't think there's a second thought, which is the worrying bit for me. I understand the attacking bit and the questioning of the perspective, but you've got to let them talk.
I think it is due to the amount of. It's hard to be neurodivergent. And to
audio listeners, he did like the whole quote mark thing.
Yeah, I did the quote mark thing. Like it is hard. We struggle. And I think that is that when you're being told that you are not, like, we all feel like that. No. And because what I have on that is that it lacks the entire nuance of what actually I go through. And often when people jump and just it's the same response. We both fire at each other. And there's no nuance to the conversation because it's really hard to explain. And for me, as I'm more and more exploring my own relationship with autism and my diagnosis and what the pieces of that are, the more I understand me. And it's like, well, shit. Like, I have struggled with this for so bloody long, and I didn't know why. I just thought there was something wrong. And my guess, and this is just my experience of like, when you realize, hey, that's a thing that I do, and I noticed how this is linked to this, and there's a connection there. It's almost giving myself permission to be me. It's giving myself permission to go, hey, this is a thing that I struggle with. And yeah, other people do. And of course, belonging and connection, and we like to relate to other people who are similar to ourselves, etc., etc., etc. But I think that is where, when someone says, oh, everyone feels like this, what I hear from that is, oh, everybody struggles with exactly the same thing you do. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, but you don't, because I didn't even know yet.
What you said there, I think is really important. What I hear.
Yes.
And the what I hear bit doesn't always match what was said.
Exactly. And that there is the piece, because often what happens for us, like in my body, when I see someone say that, of like, oi, no, you've missed stuff, but I've also missed you at the same time. Because we do struggle and it is hard. That is a reality of my life. It is real for me. And I think what happens is we interpret when someone goes, well, what if this? Like your original statement around what if it's not real? What if it's a social construct? We interpret the social when someone says something's a social construct, it's faking in our head. And what I think really helped me with our conversation, I can't remember whether it was on the recording or not. It's when you went, just because it's a social construct doesn't mean it's not real. And that was the way in. But the difference that I find with yourself versus other people is, well, one, this is a safe space for us to discuss it. Like I'll call you out on your bullshit, you'll call me out on mine. Like we know that, and that is a relationship that we have. And it's clear and it's safe to talk about that. And I also think it's, for many, the perception is it's not safe.
Something I want to add in there as well, because you said the way I perceive, and obviously we and us, because that's the narrative that you have and that you were going with, which I totally respect. But you said we struggle, which implicitly implies that whoever isn't we doesn't, which isn't right. Like everyone struggles, just to different extents because of different reasons. And I think it was someone on Twitter, again, this is a completely open safe space, they associated my comment with everyone struggles with the all lives matter thing compared to Black Lives Matter. And I'm like, they were different movements for different reasons, and I think there are pros and cons of both perspectives. Because yes, Black Lives Matter, that is a thing, that is real, they do matter. But in some contexts, looking at like parts of the UK, looking in parts of Scandinavia, Black Lives Matter isn't something that needs to be pushed that much. But in other parts of the country, it is. So the All Lives Matter and the Black Lives Matter, it's context specific, yeah?
So we are privileged and ignorant to this. So I want to make that perfectly clear.
Yeah.
Like, it does happen here in the UK.
Yeah, I said parts and context.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Just, I want to really emphasize you saying that.
Yeah.
That's
oh, yeah. So the reason I say that is because during the Black Lives Matter movement, I say over in America because it was more prominent in America, but it was in the UK. I spoke to lots of Black people, like around where I live, people I'm close with, and people from other minority groups as well. Because to me, at the start, I was completely ignorant. I was like, I know they're disadvantaged. I know there is bias and racist comments and all the rest of it, systematic bias to an extent against them in some areas, not others. And I asked them about it. And a lot of the Black people that I spoke to, close to me, didn't really know what they were talking about. Like, they hadn't experienced any of it. So they were confused as much as I was, which opened my eyes. I'm like, oh, okay, hold up a minute. So is it not my ignorance of the whole movement? Is it my ignorance of their context? And that's where the nuance came in for me with that movement. The All Lives Matter, I think, was too broad of a comment and pissed too many people off. But the general premise of all lives do matter is true, which is where I think a lot of the older population that didn't quite get hold of the Black Lives Matter movement, because I think that's predominantly where the conflict came from, my experience anyway. I think they were like, well, everyone matters. I don't get it. And I think everyone does matter. But the point they were getting at with the Black Lives Matter isn't that everyone matters. It's there is a bias against us in these scenarios, which isn't against you. Having said that, there is a bias against everyone else towards those people. And this is an anecdotal experience, this safe space. I'm going to reinforce that again. But in scouting, when I was younger, there's World Scout Jamboree, and scouts get selected to go to the World Scout Jamboree. Now, going to the World Scout Jamboree, the committee that were picking people, they needed someone of color, someone that was Black. Now, there were 23 scouts that went to go to the Jamboree. One of them was Black, 22 weren't. So we knew, irrespective of what she did, she was going to go. And they didn't say that in the camp, but after the camp, they did say that we needed someone of color. They were the words they used. So if anything, that person had an advantage in that situation over us. Now, the majority of the time, it's the other way around, but it still exists. And to me, as someone that's white, when I heard the black movement, like the whole Black Lives Matter thing, I was like, hold up a minute. There are some situations where you could reverse that. And that's where I think a lot of white people came from. So I think context, when we're talking about these difficult issues, really, really matters. What are your thoughts? I know there's a lot of like touchy topics there.
Yeah, I'm pausing just to be sure that what I'm saying is where I'm at.
Well,
because
safe space, we're working it out.
Oh yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just like working out where my head is, because yeah, and bringing it back. I cannot talk on this. I think too many people, like, I don't want to talk on this. That's
Okay.
where I'm at. Like, I don't think it is my not my responsibility, but I don't know.
Okay. I respect that. I recognize that. You don't know. So you don't know what you don't know, correct?
Yes.
So if you don't know what you don't know and you're not talking about it, how do you start to know?
Good question. Good question.
And the reason I say that is because neurodivergence, we've spoken about that. You feel like you know more about that.
Yeah.
But the underlying philosophies are essentially the same. The underpinning principles are essentially the same. It's just the group and the context has changed.
Yeah.
Now, I know almost nothing about Black lives because I'm not Black and I'm not in those communities. I'm not in those contexts. But I understand the philosophy behind a lot of the social impacts that we could have. So this is where I would like to have an open conversation with someone that has a different view. So kind of like opening up the floor if people are listening and interested. Because if you don't ask to have those open-ended conversations, you're never going to have them. And if you never have them, then you can't gain the other's perspective. So
I think that's where I'm at. Like, I don't have another perspective. I can't, like, when it comes to neurodiversity, I know what it's like on the other side, so to speak. I know that. I would much prefer, and what I have learned is I don't know and I can't know. Like,
how do you define no in that? This is epistemology.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, there is
He's paused just for everyone listening.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether we're cutting out the big pauses anymore, since we're having these conversations instead. But
well,
yeah,
we've had the same conversation throughout, because when you think about it, gamification and using a system is categorizing information in a app, in a tool, in a system, in a workflow, in a process, is the same as the beliefs and actions that we choose to make in life, which can be neurodiverse or race or any of that other fun stuff we talk about no one seems to talk about in society apart from bashing the other side, because there has to be sides. We can't all be one. That's not possible. We're not allowed. That's a joke. Sarcastic.
That's the problem, is I don't know whether society is designed to not have sides.
Okay, so going leveraging the question I asked you a second ago about knowing, what does knowing mean? I think the ability to experience something is different from the ability to know something from the outside. Knowledge typically is a justified true belief, except from the Getty cases, and I'm not going to get into the epistemology, but we can't know exactly from someone else's perspective. All we can do is try to understand what it looks like for them. So essentially putting ourselves into their shoes. How do we do that if we don't explore it? Well, we can't. we have to think about it and explore it critically. But in order to do that, we need to essentially be dumb, make mistakes, because we're at the beginning of the learning process. Now, I am much more open to doing that process in a more open environment, because to me, looking dumb, being the stupid one in the room, is how I learn, which is how I've always learned, which is why on social media, some people just leave me alone because they're like, oh, you're an idiot, you don't know what you're talking about, which is fine. And in these sorts of situations and social situations, I will say, yeah, I don't get it. Like, I am that person in the class that if everyone is like, I'm not really sure on that, I'm the one that goes, yeah, I don't get that, explain it to me. And everyone else wants to sit back and go like, yes, can someone else ask that question? I'm the one that asks the question, which I think is similar in this situation, because my understanding, I would imagine, is very similar to yours in the whole Black Lives Matter thing, because I just don't know. But if I don't ask and if I don't explore it myself, then I can't know.
I think for me, when I say I don't know, it is right now the experience like that we're in right now. There is no one who is black. It is two white dudes who have our privilege that we have. That's it.
So, question: does that mean we have to have a black person in here to have this conversation? Because if that is true, then you're implicitly suggesting that white people can't understand what the black person goes through, in which case there is no point white people doing anything for that movement because they wouldn't understand it, which I think, I'm guessing you would disagree with, because white people are trying to understand and some people do understand. So I don't think it's the color of the skin, the category, that determines whether you know or don't know. It changes your experience, but everyone's experience is different, because the black people I spoke to had a completely different experience to the black people that are talking about Black Lives Matter. So again, I think to me, that's the social construct of the separation between black and white. So the property of skin color still exists. That's still a thing. But the experience from the social constructs of black and white change our perspective. So we'd need someone with more knowledge, more experience in what? And that's I think the question you're trying to get at.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, that is the question I'm trying to get at. Yeah.
Like, who, what sort of experience do they need to have a conversation with? Which, to me, is the underlying question behind a lot of the people that were trying to learn about Black Lives Matter. Like, what do I need to know? Who do I need to ask? What experience do I need to be familiar with? Like, those sorts of questions were very difficult. And for me, I couldn't find anyone online anywhere that explained that. There were lots of anecdotal experiences of what happened in the past and all the horrible stuff that happened, because there was a lot of bad stuff that happened and still does happen. But I'm like, I can't understand or relate to any of that now, because that's back then. Like, that was an experience back then, sometimes like hundreds, 200 years prior. Yes, there are similar results that happen now, but how you get there is drastically different. You can't just pick up someone's phone 200 years ago. It doesn't exist. Like, what are the experiences? What are the actions? What happens? What doesn't happen? And again, what context? Because in America, it's drastically different from in the UK. There's still situations, but the severity in America, partly I think because of the gun situation, just my view as a UK resident, like you see a gun, you're like, oh my God, what is that thing? It can shoot projectiles in America. Like, oh yeah, I've got like 10. I know Yeah, some people that I've spoken to in America, they have like in Zoom calls, they have like guns behind them, and I'm like looking at the guns
Wow.
just in their house. Obviously, it's different states and gun laws and all that sort of stuff, but the context drastically changes how people explain something.
Yeah.
So having those conversations, you need to have someone. You essentially need to have a conversation with someone from every context, which we know is impossible. So where
Yeah.
do you start? You've got to start with, I don't know anything. I'm going to explore this in my head or out loud in a safe space, maybe. Wink, a wink. Yeah, and see what happens and see where I get to. And that's exactly what this conversation is. I may sound as if I'm talking with knowledge and understanding, expertise. I ain't got a clue. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm making it up as I go along. But that's what you got to do to start with. Same with the code. I was making it up as I was going along. I made a lot of mistakes, but I didn't know there were mistakes.
Mm.
But having the courage to do that is very, very difficult. And
Oh yeah.
And that's because of the educational system and the constraints I think the educational system puts in on us, and the social constructs around looking stupid, being dumb, and the rest of it. But for me,
And getting it wrong as well. Like
exactly.
that's the one that grabs me, is like getting it wrong.
Mm-hmm. But for
That's
me, I'm like you said. I can't remember if it was on recording or off, but you're like, you have this utopia mind in your head, like to me, and I'm like, I'm in utopia in my head. Like everyone is just a person with properties. Like there aren't categories. Like in my head they don't exist. So I'm not stupid. I just don't understand at a greater depth yet. So there isn't a, oh, you're dumb, you're stupid, you're incompetent, or you're racist, you're this, you're that. No, I'm not. I just don't understand. Teach me, tell me, I'm curious, let me know, like, give me the information. I would much rather have 10 people shouting at me saying, this is what you need to understand, this is what you need to know, than me going, yeah, I don't know, I'm going to sit here in silence and try and like tread on eggshells all day. No.
Yeah.
But that's me, that's my perspective.
Yeah, and that is an experience I'm going through now. Like my avoidance to hurt is something that I struggle with. It's like I would rather say nothing if it can avoid hurting someone. Realizing, of course, that no matter what I say, by saying nothing, I can still hurt. I'm more likely to hurt by saying nothing. And that was what was my brain was like, hey, what do I say that avoids hurt? Because that's what I wanted to do. And I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, right. Okay. Well, by saying nothing, that's, from my understanding, part of the bloody problem.
I went through therapy a while ago now. What's 11 years ago now. And that was one of the things that therapy did not work for me at all. Like all of them drove me mad. They treated me like an idiot, and I'm like, I know what I'm thinking. I know what's in my head. Shut up. But the one thing that I did get from one of the therapists, I had like 7 or 8. Ugh, I went through so many. I figured it out on my own, essentially. But they were saying that you're always going to hurt someone, whether you say or don't say to someone, you're still communicating. So trying to avoid hurting someone is impossible. So you might as well hurt them and then understand how to rectify that. Like this is what I figured out on my own. It's better off hurting them or tapering the hurt by the way that you're exploring the conversation. So instead of coming like 100 mph, right? This, that, and the other. I don't understand this thing. This is where I'm currently at. Explain it to me. Like just change how the hurt is perceived. And I think that is a way of approaching a conversation that I have taken when sort of stuck in a situation where I don't know anything and I'm making it up. Do I still feel absolutely shit? Yeah. Like I feel stupid. I feel like I'm going to hurt someone. I feel like I'm going to be offensive, which I don't want to be. But I know if I don't go through those feelings, like inside in my body, like the stomach like crumples together, like all the way through this, my stomach is like, don't stop talking.
Yeah.
But I know if I do, I will never understand. Like every signal in my brain is like, you don't know what you're talking about. You're stupid. And then anxiety kicks in and all the other like emotional stuff. But I've had to train myself to go, you know what? I can feel that. I can live that. But the reason I'm living that is because I want to learn.
Yeah. you can make a different decision.
But it's painful. It's a painful decision. I say painful. It's an unpleasant experience.
The most unpleasant thing ever, but it's an experience that you can choose to have. Yeah.
And because it's not an experience I'm going to forget quickly, whatever comes after it is obviously attached to that emotional state, and attaching a memory to an emotional state is more memorable. So when I do hit those moments where I'm talking to someone and I just don't know, and they make it blatantly obvious that I'm stupid from the next words that come out of their mouth, I feel really shit. But in my head, logically, which is hard to do, I'm like, you know what? This is what I asked for. This is what I wanted. I need to take it and be as objective as I can with this information. And it sticks in your head like glue. Because you've built up this really crappy feeling in your body, and then it's just been like climaxed by what they've said, and it's basically like a gut punch you. You're like, oh yeah, okay, that hurt. But then you build from that, and that's where you learn from. Yeah, that's some heavy stuff, but I mean, that's what learning is.
It's heavy.
And difficult.
Yeah.
And to me, this is the difference that I made a while back between knowledge of and knowledge about. I knew how to learn, but I didn't really learn. Like, I knew I needed to fail. I needed to be the dumbest one in the room. And like, I knew those things, but I didn't do it.
Yeah.
I didn't actually go, you know what? I'm going to go to that conference and ask them questions that are going to sound stupid. I didn't go to those forums and ask the really obvious question that most people probably knew the answer to because I didn't want to feel stupid. Now I do. And funnily enough, most people want to help. They want to teach. They want to explain because they know the stuff. But now I have 7-8 years experience of me putting myself in these really shitty situations that I learn loads, which is where I think I see, I get comments and people giving me feedback like, you're really smart, you know loads of stuff. No, I've put myself in lots of shitty situations. That's what I've done. And I've learned from them. But yeah, that's a different direction from gamification.
Just a little bit, like just a tiny bit of a different direction, but it's a real conversation though. I think that's something that we've been, because the episode doesn't go and we didn't have the clip at the beginning, like this is the conversations we want to be having. Like,
I'm curious to poke you a little bit. What are you taking away? What do you have in your head? What are you wrestling with at the moment?
as in from this conversation?
Yeah. Because obviously the perspective I got was you didn't want to have the conversation and you were trying to avoid it.
Yeah, that was the perspective I had. Yeah, that was what I had. I was trying to avoid it. Where I'm at now is, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I'm at.
But that's what you're thinking about. You're trying to figure out where you're at. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Interesting. You'll have to let us know where you get to it.
I will.
These are the sorts of things where I think you've experienced it a few times with the ecological dynamic stuff. It's like the week afterwards, you're not thinking about it, but something appears. You're like, oh yeah, wait, that relates, or I can see that now.
Yeah, that happens a lot. That's happening a lot in the conversations I'm having in the relation. Like, I am putting myself in these places where I am the dumbest in the room, and I'm early in that journey. And so,
where are you putting yourself there? I'm curious.
Sorry?
Where you said you're putting yourself in situations where you're the dumbest in the room. What situations are they?
Yeah, so there's multiple things that I've taken. So there's the leadership stuff that I've been doing where I am not like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just showing up and bringing all of those pieces that I have where I'm at right now. And situations like that where I'm taking more risks, like risking hurt. Yeah. And that's what like this conversation is also actually very much a similar thing of like, all right, I'll just be like, what is the decision I'm making? And the decision I made was to just not speak, was to avoid her, which I'm now like, oh, okay, cool. That's where I was at. Do I want to make a different decision right now? No. But I am now working my way through it.
So you're aware of the decision you made implicitly.
Yeah.
And you can now question, is that a decision I want to keep making?
Yes.
Nice. Cool.
And this is real personal knowledge management.
The whole clicky thing. Yeah. Yeah. make it different. Yeah, I want to show you this code now. So I don't want to share it on screen though, like in the recording. So
Bye.